I've now rounded and backed my book, and I've got the chords straight across the back, and I now need to attach the board, because with leather bindings you attach the board before you put the cover on, not as with a case binding, make up the cover first. And what I have to do next is to mark where I want the chords to go. You note I'm using chords, not tapes. Tapes are also recessed into the board, but I'll deal with that later. So to begin with, I just need to make a mark where each chord crosses the board, just with a pencil. And I'm then going to take the board and turn it round, it's easier this way, draw a line about 3/4 of an inch in, a couple of centimetres, and where those lines cross, use the smaller ruler, just draw a line at a right angle across to meet that line, and that will be the guideline for the holes and the grooves for the chords to sit in. I now have to cut the grooves with a knife. In fact, what I'll do first is make the holes where the chords will go through. The chords are going to untwist later on, and they're going to go across and into this hole here, which I'm going to make with an awl. Be careful you don't stick it through your fingers, so make sure that your fingers are well away from where the awl will come through. It's a fairly tough mill board, so it takes a bit of time. I won't do each one because it's a rather slow process. It would probably be quicker if I put it on the board, but I'll just do those two for the moment. And to do the groove, I want to cut away from the hole and make a sort of wide, shallow depression. It's not a groove. You don't want a sudden drop in the board. It's got to be somewhere where the chord can flatten out and just be accepted into the board, so it's not going to stick up. It's a little bit of a quite hard work on the wrists, but if you take your time you will get there in the end. I'll just do this second one, and then I'll do the rest of them and come back to show you how the chords are put in. So it's again, don't do this with a scalpel, it's much too dangerous. You want a good solid knife like these clip point cutting knives. So that's those are two of the grooves. I'll just tighten it up a little bit. So you should be able to see that's a fairly wide, shallow depression meeting the hole. When I've got all the holes done on that side, this is the front. I think I'm just going to make sure I write it on it, because you need a different set of holes for the backboard. When I've done the holes going through, I will turn them over and draw a rough line down there and some grooves the other way. In fact, it would be even better if I drew a straight line, and it will be a little clearer. And I'm just going to make another hole going out the other way. That's for the chords to go through, to go back out again, and that will attach the boards very firmly to the book. So that's the second one, and then groove in the same sort of way, a wide shallow depression, not a hard sort of sharp drop. You want to make sure that the chord is going to fit into the board and can be hammered down sensibly. So I'm now going to do the rest of those. I won't show you all that, but I'll come back when I'm ready to put the chords in. I've now made my holes back and front, and you do need to make sure that you do measure each board on the correct side. The one that's right for the front will not be right for the back, and it sounds silly, but it's very easy to measure the board on one side of the book and then forget that you've actually got to turn round and do it on the back, because the point is that the chords are not even, there's more space at the bottom of the book than there is at the top. The chords are not necessarily in the same place on the spine each way round, so you do need to make sure you've got the front and the back. Looks rather untidy, but that's all right. It's all going to be hammered into place, and eventually everything will be covered up anyway. So the next thing to do is to thin down the chords so that we can get them through the holes. I need to trim the cords to a manageable length, probably that's about right. So along each one it's about 3.5 inches, something like that. You don't want it too long, but at the same time you want enough to be able to feed it through. And the next thing to do is to unravel the cords, and this is called fraying out the slips. And if you turn this round, these are rather thin cords, they have a lot of strands, and in fact I'm not going to do as much thinning as I might do. Sometimes you can actually run a needle through each strand, but I think in this case I'm just going to use the knife. I'm separating out all the strands so that they are less of a lump. The purpose of this is to smooth down where the cord goes over onto the book, and so you don't get too much of a lump there. There are a lot of these here. You can unravel each strand and just run a needle. In fact, I will do that for the first one, along each one, and you lose a bit of the thickness, which is what the purpose is. You don't want to overdo it. If you do, you will find that you've got no strength left at all, and that is what has happened in a lot of the... No, I'm not sure which way I'm going, that's better. That is what has happened in a lot of the Victorian bindings, which we're now repairing, because they are simply too thin to withstand any kind of handling. So I've taken rather a lot off that, so I won't take too much off the rest. These are rather thin for doing this, but I will just show you how it's done. If you've got a cord with just 4 strands, it's obviously a lot easier. That's unraveling it. They ravel up the way you don't really expect them, but you should be able to run the cord along the middle. The other thing you can do is just take the knife and scrape it away, so that you do lose a bit of that thickness, but and it's a bit easier in this case. It's not going to be quite so fiddly, but that's the general idea, so that when you see the difference, it'll be a nice sort of slightly flatter cord when you come to put it into the book. So I'm going to do the rest of those like that, and then we'll come back and I'll insert them. I've got the slips frayed out now. They look rather fun. It's rather a nice thing to do actually, because you can sit down to it and you don't have to be worrying about time. They do look rather pretty. You could sort of imagine yourself as a hairdresser perhaps. Anyway, the slips are frayed out, and we now put some paste on each one to allow us to fit it through the board. So I'm just going to put some paste on each cord, and this will help to hold the cords firmly in the boards. I'm also going to put some paste in the groove which I cut, so that it will help again to hold everything in. Unlike glue, you do put quite a lot of paste on. Usually with gluing it's minimal, but here I'm going to put in as much as I reasonably can, because it will get absorbed by the board. I'm twisting the cord slightly so that I can thread it through the hole. It will need a bit of help, I expect. So I will probably have to push it through with the awl. We don't want the holes to be too big, because otherwise you'll find that the hole, the cord will float about in the hole and it won't really work properly. But that's coming through all right, I think. No, it's not. It's got rocked up there, so I'll start again. Make sure I got the whole cord going through, not just part of it. And it just may need a bit of twisting and working through. So I'll try again and push it through with the awl. I've turned this round so you can see it a bit better. I'm putting the paste on the third cord. I've done the first 2 already, and I'm twisting it round and feeding it through the hole so it comes through quite easily. And the same with the fourth one. And the fifth, which is a bit more obstinate, but we'll get there. So that's all the chords in position on the outside. And now we turn it round and put some more paste on the grooves on the inside. And now I'm going to feed it all back in again. I think actually I'm going to turn this round again so you can see it a bit more easily, as I haven't got my hand in the way here. So I've put a bit of paste in there on the groove. I'll put a little bit more in there, and then feed the cord back through the hole. And again, if it needs a bit of encouragement, we give it. So it should go back like that and come out the other side. There we go. So that's coming out on the other side. So you can see how the cord goes in there, and this is the back of the book. This is the head back, and goes down and comes out on the other cord. So I'll do this same thing for the rest of them. Oops, well, the hole is there. That's better. I'm just enlarging them a little bit because they are a bit too small, so they'll be a bit easier to put through. And sometimes you can just dampen them again a bit more. If they're stiff enough, they should go through quite easily. So that's all 5 chords in place and inside and out. I'm just now again going to put the board in its right place. You notice it's sitting comfortably in the shoulder, not pulled up on top of it, but it's got to be in it, resting in it quite easily. Get it in the right place, get the squares right. They will move about, but it's best to get it as right as you can. And stand the book up and pull the chords fairly tight. I should have said stand the board up, and now lower it with the board in the right place in the shoulder, and that will pull it as taut as you want it. I'm now going to hammer these into place, so I'm going to I've just angled the camera round a bit so that you can see the edge of the board, the edge of the bench, because we need that. This is just a piece of rough paper, and I'm opening the book and lifting the board up and putting it on the edge of the bench. I'm supporting the book with my hand hanging down, just to make sure that is visible. Yes. This hand, my left hand, is holding the book vertically, and I'm now going to hammer these into place, and it's quite a hard hammer. If you've got anybody else in the room, you want to warn them. So I'm flattening each cord into the groove, and also the other bits where the cord is coming out. I'm then going to turn the whole thing over and do the same thing on the inside. So you can see that that is fairly flat there, and the chords are quite well firmly in here. I can smooth them in. It's shifted a little bit, and they will, but that's probably as good as we'll get it. I'll just give it another encouraging hammer down each one. So I now need to do the next one, and then we'll just let it dry before we do anything else to the covers. So that is what the book should look like now. I've now done both ends, and you see that I'm leaving these ends here because if you cut them off now they may very well slip, so I'm going to leave them until I'm ready to do the covering. So I'll now put a piece of release paper inside. You've got the waste sheet there to prevent any sticking, and that's what it's for, but I will put that in anyway just to help prevent the moisture. And then we'll just leave it under a weight until tomorrow. It needs 24 hours or so to dry, and so it's best just left alone. Again, make sure that the squares are right and it's as square as possible. I'm just going to show you also how to do the same thing with tapes. This is same sort of book, but a repair, and it actually belongs to one of my students who didn't want to take the back off because it was too difficult to get off. So we've glued tapes across rather than sewing them, and we're now going to recess them into the board. I've cut them level, and I've also made a rough pencil guide across the back. I'm just going to check the squares each end. I think possibly I'll move it up a fraction and push that in a little bit. So that's about right. So I'm just going to do all that square with the ruler. Just draw those lines across. I in fact drew them across the tape so that I could get them lining up. So those are the lines which we need to cut, and I'm just going to cut down each one. I'll cut along first of all. And so I'm just cutting along the end of the tape line, and then just give another cut down on those lines. Again, you notice I'm using this hard knife. You can't really use a scalpel and this sort of thing. It's just not sensible. And then I'm now going to lift away the bit of board that's in between those two cut lines, and hopefully it should peel away, and you take away enough so that the tape can sit recessed into the board and will be more or less at the same level. You can, and in fact I usually do, put over the top a thin layer of manila or Belmont hollow card, which will help to hold the tape in place, and also if there are any lumps you can then sand it down so that the tape won't really show. So I'm just going to do these 4, and then I'll show you just how to put them in. I've now finished doing the grooves, as you see there, and I just need to make sure that they're more or less right for the tapes to end up level. So it's a lot simpler than the chords. All I have to do is to glue them in, and you can use paste I suppose, but glue is quicker. The point about the paste on the chords is you've got to twist them and get them through, and it takes a long time. This is really very quick. You can, if you wish, make chisel holes here and push the tape through and take it through to the other side and out again, but frankly it's so difficult I just don't like doing it very much, so I just leave those like that, and I also push the tape down a little bit on the side of the board so that it doesn't interfere with the leather. It doesn't really seem to be a problem at all. But that's it, so that's very simple. And then this piece of manila card I will glue over the top. I'll get it right along this edge, but the other ones I'll just trim off afterwards. So I'll simply glue this out and put it on the top, and that will attach the boards in the same way as the cords do, ready for leather covering.